You wake up one morning and notice the room feels like it's spinning. You stand up and feel like you're walking on a boat. This goes on for days before you decide to head to the doctor for answers. If this sounds like you might end up hanging out with our next guest. Hello, and welcome to Wine or Whiskey, What's Your Work, where we sit down with someone who loves their job to learn more about what they do. Tonight's guest is Alicia, a physical therapist assistant. Hi, Alicia.
Hi there.
So tell us, what's in your glass tonight?
I have some red wine, some Malbec Piatelli. It's quite delicious.
Nice.
Very nice.
Jen, do I see you have a wine tonight?
I am actually trying the same because I've never had this before, and I asked Alicia what's her favorite drink. So I'm trying to because I don't normally drink Malbec. It's quite good.
Cool.
And you, Brittany?
I am drinking Tuscan red table wine.
A physical therapist assistant was listed as one of the top in-demand jobs for 2020 by CNBC. On ONET Online, it has an interest code of SRI, social, realistic, and investigative. The social occupations frequently involve working with, communicating with, and teaching people. These occupations often involve helping or providing service to others. Realistic occupations often involve working activities that include practical, hands-on problems and solutions. They often deal with plants, animals, and real-world materials like wood, tools, machinery. Many of these occupations require working outside and do not involve a lot of paperwork or working closely with others. And the investigative occupations frequently involve working with ideas and require extensive amount of thinking. These occupations can involve searching for facts and figuring out problems mentally.
So Alicia, growing up, did you always want to be a physical therapist assistant?
So actually, as a kid, I was really into writing stories, and I went into journalism as a first career. So this was a later on in my life sort of career change.
Interesting. So why did you go into your job, and maybe even tell us a little bit about your career journey?
Sure. So I was working in journalism, working for a newspaper, and started to look for something a little bit different. I was getting a little restless, maybe a little bit burned out, and I wanted to try something new. So I read a story about a physical therapist that was working with a veteran who'd been injured and was helping him with rehab. And I thought it sounded really interesting and intriguing. And I didn't know a whole lot about it. So I contacted a couple physical therapy clinics in my town where I was living and asked if I could shadow there. And I shadowed what they did, and I thought it looked really cool. And so that kind of sparked my interest further.
I'm even curious too, what about it sparked your interest? Was it the helping others, or?
I think so. Yeah, I think, in journalism, there's a sense of you're helping your community. That's why you're trying to spread information and help people know what's going on, and explore, different topics and share that with people. But there's a disconnect, right? So you're producing the product, and it's going off to these people out in the world, out in your community, whatever. But you don't get that same like one-to-one feedback or interaction like you might with other occupations. And I think part of that probably was appealing to me, that you could actually get to know somebody that you're working with and form a relationship with them and watch them progress. So it's a little bit different sort of job satisfaction with that.
So in that career switch, since there doesn't seem to be on the surface a lot of overlapping skills, how did you get your job?
So once I decided that I was really interested in this, I started meeting with a couple people. One was a physical therapist assistant who was in one of the clinics where I shadowed, and I took her out for lunch, and I just asked her a million questions to make sure that's what I wanted to do. And it sounded great. And then I met with a PT, a physical therapist, who had actually left the field just to get her take, like, okay, why did it not end up being the right fit for you? So I could kind of see that other side of the coin. And both those were really helpful experiences and just kind of framing what the field is like, what I might expect out of it. And then I applied to get into the program. It's a 2-year program. And then after I was finishing up school, I found the job listing for the specialty that I ended up getting the job in. And my interest in that actually came out of a clinical that I had, which is like an internship. And that's part of your school. You have to do several of those in different settings. And one of them was in a neurological floor. There were several patients there with balance problems. And I thought that was pretty intriguing. And we learned some of that in school, some of the different aspects of the balance systems. And so when I was about to graduate and was looking for a job, I knew kind of in the back of my mind that was an area that had been of special interest to me. So when the job came up for that specialty, I jumped on it.
Oh, fun. I'm even curious too. Tell me a little bit about clinical. Like, how long is that for like a listener that isn't familiar with some of the kind of medical backgrounds kind of careers?
Yeah. So that one part of the appeal to the PTA program for me, being a person who's going back for a second career, I didn't want a huge, long career time frame to change and start this new one. So the PTA program itself is 2 years, and there is a prerequisite, usually a couple of different classes you have to take. So it took about a year to get those done. And then the program itself is 2 years. Compared with the PT degree is a doctorate. And so I believe that's 6 years. It's several years beyond. You get your undergrad and then you go on to get your doctorate after from there. So.
Yeah, and one of our first guests on the show actually was a doctorate of physical therapy. So that was one of the really exciting things about getting to interview you and her, is see the comparison between two jobs that are in the same field and how they work together. So she talked about how she did a 4-year undergrad, and then it was a 3-year program to do the doctorate. So a total of 7 years.
Okay.
Very nice. So what does a typical day look like for you, Alicia?
Yeah, so in my setting it's outpatient. So we schedule our patients in advance. So this will be a little bit different if it's an inpatient setting where things change maybe a little bit more frequently or sporadically. But for us, I can usually look ahead at my schedule the night before, the day before, to see what patients I'm going to be seeing and kind of prep for them. And then the day of, I'm going to come in. I usually see patients for either 45 minutes or an hour typically. With our type of sessions. And so in the morning, I'm just, getting all my paperwork together, looking ahead at who I'm going to see, where they're at in their plan of care, what kind of exercises, kind of preparing mentally what they're going to need for that day. Any other extraneous factors, are they going to need to check in with the doctor? Because we have a medical staff and audiologists as well. So just kind of, getting ready for each session and mentally preparing. And then when you go to the session, it's going to depend on how they're feeling that day. And if they're having a migraine, we're going to totally scrap that plan and try some other stuff. So you kind of have to be nimble and ready to adjust. But yeah, I like that I can prep in advance a little bit. And of course, things are going to change during the day, but I can at least go in kind of with a general idea of where we're going to aim for.
Nice.
And what does a session look like? So you're with them for 45 minutes to an hour. Walk us through what happens in that time period.
Yeah, it kind of depends on where they're at in their journey. If they're early on, if it's one of their first visits, we're going to do a lot of education. So especially since our specialty, the more you talk about it, the more people kind of come out of the woodwork and they are familiar, or maybe they know someone who's had a vestibular issue. But a lot of people haven't necessarily heard the specifics of the vestibular system and how that can affect your balance, or what kind of issues with that can affect dizziness or contribute to dizziness. So we'll do a lot of talking about the anatomy and how that can affect how that plays into your symptoms, and then what our special kind of therapy exercises are going to do for them. Ours are quite different from your traditional physical therapy that works on strengthening. So we want to give people a heads up. It's going to look different, and we usually tell people just to be prepared. It might make you feel a little bit funny at first, but then the goal is ultimately to help you feel better overall. So talking a lot about that, kind of the expected trajectory. And then we're just going to be working through various exercises that are customized toward their specific diagnosis. So we have pretty broad range. We're going to be doing specialized inner ear focused tasks that challenge their balance system and challenge their visual system as well as their vestibular. But also we work with folks with concussions that may have neck issues or back issues, and folks that maybe have lost some strength. During COVID, a lot of people are in their houses not moving around a lot, so they're losing muscle mass. So we're going to do strengthening to build that back up. So it could be kind of a wide variety of things. And then we're going to try to progress those exercises if they're doing well with them, which is usually the case. That's ideal. And then periodically they would need to do kind of like a reassessment. And that would be done with the physical therapist. So I'm not typically doing that type of session. But generally I'm there more for the progression of the exercises.
Cool. So you talked a little bit about your typical day. What does an extreme day look like? What makes it an extreme day?
For me, coming in and seeing like everything's changed. So I had in my mind from the day before who I was going to see and kind of, if I've worked with them before, knowing, okay, this is probably what we're going to work on today. Maybe someone called in sick or whatever. And so the schedule changed up a lot. And so if a ton of those changes happen and I'm having to adapt to those like on the fly, that can happen and you learn how to roll with it. But I would say something like that maybe, or if you have a patient that comes in that's like really upset or anxious, that's not uncommon for people to have some anxiety or some nervousness. We're pretty used to that. So right now I'm not thrown off by that. But maybe when I first started, that probably would have felt pretty extreme, just to not, to learn how to work with people and kind of set them at ease and help them to feel comfortable and have a sense of trust with the provider to know that, this is a new and different kind of experience, but we do this all the time and people get better. So extreme, I guess, maybe just unpredictability if a lot of things change. But I work with a really great team and we all really help each other out. And so we're all kind of looking out for each other, trying to figure out if we know somebody's having a really stressful day, we're going to jump in and try to, maybe we help sanitize their room after they're done. If they had a patient that got sick, sometimes people get a little bit of stomach upset feeling, or if they just need a little bit of help, we'll jump in and help them and try to make the flow go better. So I think working with a really good team that you trust and you have each other's back, that can make an extreme day much, much better.
Interesting. So what type of skills do you use on the daily?
So I would say there's a mixture of your kind of maybe practical skills that you learn in school and that you also learn on the job. And we have continuing ed classes we're required to stay up with. So you're learning all those or brushing up or developing those further. And then, so that's kind of, the essence of what we're doing, like learning to figure out where the patient is at, how the exercises are going. Can we move them forward in a certain way? What's the best way to do that? But then there's the soft skills, which I would say are probably, a really huge, important part of that as well. And so that's, in our case, that would be building rapport with people from all different kinds of backgrounds, figuring out what their goals are, because we might come in and say, okay, well, clearly this person wants to do A, B, or C, but when you sit down with them and talk with them, you find out, no, actually, this is what they want. And so we need to adjust course and make sure we're working toward their goals. So learning to communicate with people that might have different communication styles, learning to kind of work past barriers. So some people might come in with kind of a guard up for a variety of reasons, and kind of working, learning how to understand them and work with them. And teamwork, communicating with your coworkers, that's really important. Yeah, kind of all those different parts of the equation.
Okay. I'm even interested too, given some people have had physical therapy before, but some people have never done it before. Even what's kind of some of the conversations that you have with an individual that's completely unfamiliar with physical therapy and what you do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if they've never had PT before, you know, a lot of people come in wanting to know, can I take a medication to fix what I have going on?
Mhm.
Which is a great question. You know, if there were a pill to fix these issues, that would make life a lot simpler. I think that's natural. So the biggest thing is we have to make sure people's expectations are such that they know that's not how our system works. And actually the most effective thing for retraining the vestibular system is vestibular exercises, vestibular therapy. There are some medications that can come alongside and be kind of helpful tools to help them get from A to B, but in most cases it's going to be the therapy. So letting them know that that's, you know, kind of how we operate, and that we're going to be giving them the tools and guiding them and educating them on how to help themselves feel better. And then it's going to be a big part of them then taking that and running with it and doing the exercises at home, kind of learning how to listen to their body and how they respond and adjust them a little bit if they need to, and kind of that partnership and that team play with that.
You remind me too of the interview we had with the physical therapist. Can you really tell if somebody has or hasn't been doing their exercises at home?
Yeah, for sure. we have a good sense.
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing is if they're getting better, in most cases, it's a good sign they're doing their exercises. If people aren't getting, you know, if people are a little bit plateaued or having trouble, there could be a variety of factors. And so that's part of our job too, to kind of help problem solve that with them. Like, are you not sleeping well? Do you have a lot of stress in your life? Or, you know, are there these migraine triggers that are playing a role? So it can be other things too, but we know.
Okay.
And, you know, one thing I appreciate, I don't think people really lie to me about that very often. They're pretty forthcoming. They'll come in and say, I didn't do them this week, you know? And so we talk about that and just kind of discuss, well, okay, you know, you were moving to a new house or whatever, you know, you had this going on and now you're going to get back on track and things will be okay. So
Makes sense.
yeah.
So what education is required to be successful as a physical therapist assistant?
So to be a physical therapist assistant I'm pretty sure in every state, I think there was one state you didn't need to have a license, but pretty much every state you need to be licensed. So you need to, in order to do that, you need to graduate from an accredited PTA program. And there are a handful in Minnesota. So that's the 2-year program. And then once you graduate, you have to pass the examination, the licensing exam. Different states do vary based on the score, like what is the mandatory score that you have to achieve in order to be licensed, but they're all pretty similar. And then once you've graduated, you've passed the exam, then you get licensed, and then you have to maintain your license. So you have to do a certain number of continuing education credits or take so many classes to get those credits every 2 years.
Did you find the exam hard?
Yes. I mean, it was challenging, but so one thing I did that was pretty helpful was there was this other class you could take. It was like a prep class, basically, like a boot camp. And they didn't really teach you the material, like you have your resources for that, but they kind of taught you how to approach studying and kind of setting up a strategy and a framework for that. And then I had some of the tools that I bought, like for review and that kind of thing. So with all that, like it was manageable. I don't really get too bad of test taking anxiety. I know some people do, and that's really, really hard because they may know the material well and still have a hard time with that. But it was challenging, but it's like your average standardized test in terms of you've got your multiple choice questions. There were no essays or anything like that. So those tests I feel pretty comfortable with usually.
How long is the exam?
It's been quite a while since I've taken it. So it took a few hours, maybe 4 hours. I'd have to go back and check about that, but it was a few hours long. Yeah, it's not as long as the PTs. It's quite a bit longer.
We talked about you're a physical therapist assistant. What is the difference between a physical therapist assistant and a physical therapy aide?
Mhm. Yeah, so a physical therapist assistant has to have a license in order to practice. A physical therapist aide does not. And so they need to work. So there's a lot of like supervisory requirements in terms of like insurance with PTAs. Um, and depending on your setting, with PT aides, so physical therapist aides versus assistants, I'm pretty sure that they need to have PT supervision like all the time. That's not the case for physical therapist assistants. And the aides, so what they do is they basically would be reviewing things that have already been established with the patient. So they're not going to start anything new or progress in exercise, but they know how to safely take a patient through their exercises, make sure that they're using good form, that they're doing it okay, and to let somebody know if, something isn't working out. The physical therapist assistant, so we're trained in how to progress the exercises, so we can make changes to them.
So you can kind of customize if you need to.
Yep, exactly.
Cool. So what kind of salary can someone expect in a physical therapist assistant kind of position?
So I was looking this up in anticipation of this interview, and I did not find a great resource for Minnesota. So I would say the best bet is to go to like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can get the national data, which is cool, is good. And they have like the top 5 states in terms of highest pay for that profession. I couldn't find Minnesota on there. I could find them for aides, but not for assistants.
And what is the expected career growth for someone that graduates from a physical therapist assistant program?
So I think it's going to depend on your setting and kind of what you want to do. So you can continue to develop your skills, which we do have to take continuing ed. But if you want to kind of continue to broaden your skills in a certain specialty, you can, after a certain number of years, you can actually get like an extra certification through the American Physical Therapy Association. And it's a pretty intensive program. It's divided up by specialties. So they don't have one just for vestibular. I've checked into that, but they do have like broader scopes like neurology or working with older adults. And you'd work with mentors, you take on some special projects, you do some research and that type of thing. So you can develop your skills further there and kind of your credentials in that regard. And then I think, probably the other avenue for PTAs would be if you wanted to take on or to become like a department manager, that would be an option. So it'd be kind of adding on to your physical therapist assistant duties. But there are other avenues within healthcare where you can use that. You can kind of take on some of those management roles as well.
I forgot to ask earlier, I was kind of curious and I was thinking about it too, like how many continuing eds do you have to do and how many years? Is it like, I've seen as little as like 20 credits a year versus like 70 in like 3 years or something like that?
Yeah, it depends on if you're a PT versus a PTA.
Oh,
So for PTAs, and it depends on your state too. So
oh.
Minnesota is 20 every 2 years.
Okay.
And so, yep. And so then, and you can take it anytime in that time frame. And then you can be audited. So you want to keep track of your records of all of that too.
Document.
Yep, exactly. And when you renew your license every year, you sign off and say, I have completed the recommended number or the required number of continuing ed requirements.
Cool.
Yep.
Can you give me an example of what's a class that you would take as a continuing ed?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, the options are endless. I get flyers in the mail every other day for different classes. And it's going to depend on your interest in your specialty. So for me, I take a lot on like advanced vestibular treatments, vestibular migraines, concussions. You can take some on working with patients who've had a stroke. If you do outpatient rehab, maybe you want to do like a total shoulder specialty class. You can take a manual therapy. So doing like specialized kind of like massage therapy techniques where you're working on specific muscles with certain goals. There's a lot of different pieces that can play into that. So you can take classes on that. Using different types of modalities, they call it. So like eStim, different outpatient techniques that they would use. So it really depends on your avenue, but the sky is the limit. There's something for everybody. I've taken some on, there's some that are focused on, that I really have enjoyed, on strengthening for older adults, because there's kind of this notion that you have to be, you know, really careful with older adults. You shouldn't go super heavy with the weights. And there's a new movement that's just saying that's not true. Older adults we need to push them more. And so I've taken a lot of really great classes on how to do that, which has been fun.
Cool. What's the one thing you've learned in your profession that you apply to your personal life?
Oh, that's a great question.
Random thoughts by Brittany.
I like it. That I've learned in my professional life that I use in my personal life.
Yeah.
I think intentionality might be one. So, you know, when we go into a session, we go in like with specific goals in mind. So the PT establishes those goals for the patient on their first day based on the patient's personal wishes. And also in our case, like we want patients to be at certain age norms. So we do a walking balance assessment, we do a standing balance assessment, and there's a lot of research that's gone into these tests, so we can compare how they do with where they should be for their age. So that might be part of their goal, to reach that age norm. So we have a lot of really we're very intentional about the exercises that we give them, that they're in line with those goals, not just, you know, kind of doing random stuff. And so I think I've been thinking about that more in my personal life when I'm approaching whether it's like friendships or what kind of workout I want to do. I've started to realize that that intentionality helps me get in line with my goals better too.
Nice. So I feel like this is even a good segue. So like closing question, any words of wisdom for our listeners that you might have if they do want to pursue a career as like a physical therapist assistant? What would you tell them?
Yeah, well, the thing that was the most helpful for me was seeking people out and just asking them a lot of questions. And I'm a question asker in general.
With the background.
I like to research things to death. So, you know, I did a lot of online research, but then I would, you know, go out to lunch with people that had been in the profession and just telling them flat out, this is why I'd like to have lunch with you. I'm going to ask you a million questions. And they were very, very nice. And it was so helpful because I was coming from such a different career background. I was kind of clueless about a lot of things, and they knew that, you know, so they were very understanding. So I think, yeah, just having the freedom, finding a few people that were willing to do that and just be able to pepper them with any and every question, and maybe even follow up with them later too, as I went and started school, and, you know, could reach back out to them if I had other questions too. So yeah, just kind of getting people kind of in your corner that can help you frame, is this the right thing for me? And then going forward, that could be a resource for you in the future too.